Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Welcome at the Black Archives. For those who haven't been, we're a historical archive, cultural center that focuses on Black history, culture, but we always want to make a connection to the present. That's a little bit about us. I'm Nikita. I co-organized, co-programmed this event today, and I'm so glad you're all here. So that's my little welcome. Before I introduce our guest, I just wanted to take you with me into why we wanted to do this program. Someone asked me today or said to me today, well, I haven't really seen that much on connecting all of these struggles. And that's not to sort of set us apart, because I do think that people are doing the work in connecting these different struggles, in the Congo, in Sudan, in Palestina. And, in connection to that, to other people raising awareness, we were very much inspired, and we also wanted to do this. We organized a couple of community gatherings, one on Sudan, one on Congo, in a couple of last months. And this is one that sort of brings that together, because we don't want to talk about this in isolation, but we want to see where the connections are, and also inspire in making these connections more visible in our activism. So showing international solidarity and finding each other more. So that's a little bit about the event and why we did it. And I also pulled up some archival material. So it's just some to sort of the things that we've been going through. We're also currently working on a little installation that's called Nobody's Free Until Everybody's Free. That's also, of course, inspired the event. And what we've seen in our archives is that people have been finding each other and have been showing solidarity for decades, centuries. So we found articles that, for example, communist Otto Huiswoud wrote, who was also for a while based here in Amsterdam, about Congo, but also Hermina Huiswoud, who wrote about Palestine. And this was all in the 30s, last century. But we also found, for example, pamphlets of Black people against apartheid, so apartheid's struggle in South Africa. And so this is the material that we come across, and inspired by the people that went before us, we also organized this event. That's a little about that. So now I want to invite the speakers to come up. So please join me. There's Florence. Yes, thank you. And artist Racine. Yes. And there's also Gras, and she's gonna start off the gathering today. So she's gonna present on the connections. We're starting in Congo, but we're making also, specifically Gras is also highlighting where the collections are briefly. Then we'll be diving into the discussion, and then we'll end with a performance by Racine, who I'm so happy is going to do a couple of songs for us. So can you cue up the presentation for Gras? And then I'm just going to hand it to you. Please take it away.
So my name is Gras Njako. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Amsterdam in the Department of Philosophy. And my PhD, I'm working in within decolonial, mostly decolonial theory, and I wanted to start off this evening with this particular song. Not only it's a song Indépendance Cha-Cha by Joseph Kasebele, also known as Le Grand Calais. It's a song that came out in 1960. So it's about the Congolese independence. The Congo became independent on the 30th of June 1960, but the song came out months before the actual independence came about, as it was recorded during the negotiations that took place for independence. At the end of 1959, December 1959, I think it was, there were roundtable conversations that were Belgium organized roundtable conversations to negotiate independence, which the prominent Congolese political parties were invited to. And one of those political parties, they invited several musicians to come join them in Belgium, to accompany them and entertain them. And one of those groups was African jazz. And during that time that the negotiations took place, they composed and recorded this song. And the song came to became the anthem of Congolese independence. And during the song, you also hear them reference table ronde, which was the round table, and you hear them name several prominent Congolese politicians, such as the most famous name being Lumumba, the name that you could hear in the song, but also Kasavubu and other famous and other Congolese politicians. And so I wanted to like I said, so it's the song became an anthem of Congolese independence. But what I find, and then afterwards also for the Pan-African movement, the song became very important. But what I also what is also significant about the song, I think, and why it's so important, it's not. Because, like as the title says, it's independence cha-cha. So, like the cha-cha factor is, of course, a reference to Afro-Cuban music, because the cha-cha is Cuban music, referencing to a Cuban dance as well, and that is because in the 30s and 40s. Afro-Cuban music became very influential in the Congo, as also a lot of Afro-Cubans, of course, descendant from Central Africans, like descendants of enslaved Africans who were oftentimes from Central Africa, especially and Afro-Cubans who were more from the eastern parts of the country. Where music genres like the son and rumba were first originated, and so in that way it traveled back to the Congo in the 30s. This music that has Congolese rhythms traveled back to the Congo. But what is significant about this is because of the fact that for Congolese people, this Afro-Cuban music was to them a demonstration of the fact that one could be, quote unquote, modern or cosmopolitan without being Western, without being Belgian. Because what colonialism did, of course, is imposing itself as a singular, universal story, and that the way to be modern, the way to be a part of the world is to be like us, basically, to be like Belgians, to be like Europeans. And so the fact that this music could come from abroad, could come from the quote-unquote New World, the Americas, but yet have rhythms and that still was so very familiar to their own, that they could recognize themselves in, had an enormous impact on Congolese people, especially on Congolese musicians, of course. So they started. So they started playing with Cuban music to create their own music, and so they didn't have to refer to Belgium, to Europe, to create their own to create their own identities and to find their own place in the world, and they could sing about independence, sing about their sing about their also about our hopes for the future, to sing about their freedom to have a consciousness about colonialism without needing to refer to Europe, without having to rely on European theories. They could just do that by listening to Black communities abroad, and in a way staying true to who they themselves are. So and that's why I think this song is also so very important. And then I showed them this image. It's also an image of Patrice Lumumba, but it was done by Cuban artists. So like to show also like how this solidarity during that time was mutual. So like Congolese people being influenced by black communities from abroad, but also black communities from abroad being very much aware of what was going on in the Congo. So, like when Patrice Lumumba eventually died, was murdered, there was also this was also commemorated in the Congo, in Cuba, and it was written about by black people throughout the diaspora, such as Aimé Césaire writing a poem, writing a play called Une saison au Congo to like highlight what was going on in the Congo and the struggle there. So like yeah, so that's why I wanted to start off with Indépendance Cha-Cha. And so, like during the song, you saw multiple images, like from the day of the day that the Congo became independent. We saw Patrice Lumumba, Le Roi Baudouin, the King Baudouin of Belgium, men and women of the Congo, victorious independence fighters. I salute you in the name of the Congolese government. I ask all of you, my friends, who tirelessly fought in our ranks, to mark this June 30, 1960, as an illustrious date that will be ever engraved in your hearts. A date whose meaning you will proudly explain to your children, so that they in turn might relate to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren the glorious history of our struggle for freedom. Although this independence of the Congo is being proclaimed today by agreement with Belgium, an amicable country with which we are on equal terms, no Congolese will ever forget that independence was won in struggle, a persevering and inspired struggle carried on from day to day, a struggle in which we were undaunted by privation or suffering and stinted neither strength nor blood. It was filled with tears, fire, and blood. We are deeply proud of our struggle, because it was just and noble and indispensable in putting an end to the humiliating bondage forced upon us. That was our lot for the 80 years of colonial rule, and our wounds are too fresh and much too painful to be forgotten. We have experienced forced labor in exchange for pay that did not allow us to satisfy our hunger, to clothe ourselves, to have decent lodgings, or to bring up our children as dearly loved ones. Morning, noon, and night, we were subjected to jeers, insults, and blows because we were nègres, as he says. So this was the speech that Patrice Lumumba, the first prime minister of the Congo, held on the day that the Congo became independent. And the situation that Lumumba describes in the speech is a situation that the Congolese people have had to endure for a very long time. And it's a speech that could just as easily apply today. So, like books that are about the history of the Congo often have titles that reference the oppression and exploitation during the colonial period. So, with titles such as veroverd, bezet, gekoloniseerd, which means conquered, occupied, colonized, onderworpen, onderdrukt, geplunderd, so subjected, oppressed, plundered, the Congo, plunder and resistance, King Leopold's Coast, Red Rubber, and books that are about the situation, the present-day situation, have titles such as Africa's World War, Congo, the Rwandan Genocide and the Making of a Continental Catastrophe, Carnage, les guerres secrètes en Afrique, which means carnage, the secret wars in Africa, Consuming the Congo, Cobalt Red, how the blood of the Congo powers our lives. So there's always been a lot of interest for the mineral wealth of the Congo, and the Congolese population has always been a victim of this. So, like, the colonial period was characterized by violence and oppression for the exploitation of mineral wealth such as rubber and uranium, and the current day situation is marked by violence and oppression for the exploitation of cobalt and coltan. So we go from red rubber to cobalt red. So these are this is the book Rood Rubber, Red Rubber. That's about the colonial history and about the rubber exploitation in the Congo during colonial times. And then a book that's about the present day situation is Cobalt Red. So, like, not much has changed. It's just that it's just like the product changes. So during colonial times, this was rubber for the then booming car industry, and today it's cobalt and coltan for our smartphones, computers, and also for our electric cars we need lithium. So so we talk about green energy, but like it's actually red energy. Yeah. And another constant factor is the fact that these facts are everything but a secret. So the slavery and mass murder that accompanied the rubber exploitation during the reign of King Leopold II of Belgium came to light thanks to the work of the African-American journalist George Washington Williams, and it became an international scandal. And the Congo went from being a private property of King Leopold II to an official colony by the Belgian state. But the oppression continued afterwards, as rubber was still needed for industrialization of Europe and North America. So the interests were enlarged because the Congo also possessed mineral wealth that other countries needed. So last year, the movie Oppenheimer won the Oscar for best picture. Director Christopher Nolan got the Oscar, the Academy Award for Best Director, and Cillian Murphy got the Academy Award for Best Actor. And during the movie, the name Shinkolobwe wasn't mentioned, while it is the name of this mine in Katanga, where they got the uranium that was needed to create the atom bombs that were eventually dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this too was paired with the suffering and exploitation of the Congolese population. And this wasn't a secret. These facts were known. There are no hidden histories or hidden figures. There are people and histories that are deemed more important than others, and where we at first then do not want to pay attention to. And the present day situation is also everything but a secret. And it's also easier today. It's easier than ever to become aware of what's going on in the Congo. The facts were already known, such as that young children are being exploited in the mines of Katanga, where they work to get products like cobalt and coltan, so that we here in the West can use our smartphones, tablets, and quote unquote sustainable cars. Quote unquote sustainable, because how sustainable and green is it if it's relying on so much human suffering, exploitation and child labor? The situation in the Eastern Congo has been known for much longer. So Dr. Denis Mukwege, that's him. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for his effort in helping women who have been victims of sexual violence. But when he came to the Netherlands that same year to speak at Parliament, only three members of Parliament showed up, because we deem certain figures and certain events to be much more important than others. So there's nothing new to be said about the present-day conflict. Nothing that we will hear today is supposed to be new. So any shock about any facts that you may hear will just be a sign of our complicity in the erasure of these histories, and the sign that we've been indifferent for far too long. C'est notre sort à tout qui se déroule au Congo, is what Fanon wrote about the Congo crisis in the 60s. And this too applies today. Because not only is what is happening in the Congo exemplary for colonialism and the fate of the colonized, it also implicates us all because through our consumer behavior, we are all implicated in the violence that takes place there. And if the situation that Lumumba described in this speech, in the speech that he gave on the day of Congolese independence, if that situation remained the same, then what also remains the same is the hope that he expressed. The hope that he expressed in the last letter he wrote to his wife before he died, when he said, "The day will come when history will speak, but it will not be the history which will be taught in Brussels, Paris, Washington, or in the United Nations. It will be the history which will be taught in the countries which have won freedom from colonialism and its puppets. Africa will write its own history, and in both North and South, it will be a history of glory and dignity. Do not weep for me. I know that my tormented country will be able to defend its freedom and its independence. Long live the Congo, long live Africa." So these histories are being written now, and they're more accessible than ever. And we ought to listen to the loud voices that come from the Congo. Long live the Congo, long live Africa.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great opening, and that will give us some space to dive into the way that these different struggles are connected. And I think the way you ended is it's a good ending to sort of dive into that more, because I think the way we sort of open now with the history of Congo, we could have done the same talking about Palestine. We could have gone back to British colonialism, to the Zionist project that goes back to last century and beyond. I think we could have done the same for Sudan. We could have started with British colonialism and the subsequent effects that had in so many military coups that followed. And I think it says something about the origins of all of these different wars, genocides in the history of colonialism, but also the way that it obviously connects to imperialism and the exploitation of land, the extraction of resources. So before I just ramble on, I just want to sort of open it up for Florence to also, and for Racine to also comment on this. Where do you see the connections to these different struggles?
First off, hello everyone. My name is Racine. Nice that y'all came. Yeah, when you started talking about the products, the stuff like the cobalt or the things that they really wanted to take, that are taken out of the Congo, is like Sudan has so much gold, you know. a lot of the gold that's being sold in, for example, if we're talking about the Emirates, or it's like gold that comes from Sudan. So I feel like that also that's really something that really I saw a lot of similarities in. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, it's like all kind of the same beast, which is like, yeah, capitalism and imperialism. You see the connections in like many, many things. I mean, there's, for instance, this Israeli billionaire, Dan Girdler, who is like, made his wealth out of mines in the Congo and reinvested that into illegal settlements in Israel and Palestine. And like it's so like intricate, like these connections. Sorry, I'm like, I have to gather my thoughts a little bit.
Take your time.
But yeah, the way that these people are being exploited and the products that we make from that, and the consumerism, and the way that consumer culture is, in my opinion, kind of the way that this whole imperialist project is kind of rationalized to people like us who like live in the imperial core and might disagree with what's happening, but also find themselves in a situation where like the world is built in such a way that consumerism in these products coming from exploitation just make what feels like normal life to us. And even though we disagree, we are, when we first confronted with these struggles, wondering, okay, but how are we just going to stop using phones? How are we just, oppose these, these structures? And I think, like what we're seeing when it comes to Palestinian solidarity movements, boycotting is such a huge part of that. And we are now seeing that with Congo kind of starting as well, because I think, there's kind of that similarity, it's like disengaging from how we contribute financially and like with the money that we spend to the exploitations.
Yeah, and I think it's also evident that, the connections between sort of the countries that are also then extracting. So they have like there being conflict also makes it, they're not only profiting for it, but they're also, of course, invested in keeping these conflicts going, because essentially that makes it able for them to extract in the way that they're extracting, to exploit to the extent that they're exploiting. Because I think in the Congo community gathering, we also talked about exactly this. So, for example, that the Israeli diamond market is so heavily, it's reliant on the Congo, and there being conflict there. So, how do you see this also that, it's not only that they're exploiting and they're using these resources, but then there's a relation to that and keeping these conflicts going. And I think the Congo is sort of the worst example where, you can go back 30 years. Obviously, as Klaus pointed out, you can go back way further, but there's this sort of this difference in now, the sort of more recent developments are going back 30 years. So how do you look, and I think it's also for Sudan, we've seen this as well, where there is this investment, or there's an investment to keep it going, that every time where we see there is sort of, for example, resistance and people coming closer to coming to the capital, you also see like a surge again, and also, forces backed by, for example, the UAE. So how do you reflect on that?
How do I reflect on that? I mean, just my first pure human emotion is just like, it sucks. It just sucks. Because it is not, and I mean, I can speak for Sudan, but I can definitely speak for all these countries. Like they don't deserve that, Sudanese people, like even during the protest that started, that was sort of like you could say like the kickstart of everything that's happening right now. Like I think the protest started in December 2018, and back then in front of the parliamental building, there were like it became like a little town, like a village. You know, there was so much beautiful things going on there actually. Like and people would check everyone that came to protest whether they would have weapons on them or not, because all these protests were peaceful.
Is everyone familiar with why these protests in 2018 started? Or do we need like a little background?
Okay, so basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know, but
He's looking
basically,
at his mother, who's a brilliant.
yeah.
Mind.
But there were like after the independence, you know, from the British, there has been multiple coups that took place, but overall it has been like ruled by two different like dictatorships, you would say. One being the latest one that some of us may know is al-Bashir, who ruled for I think a good 30 years, and that's at some point I think it was like the oil price that was like the last drop that made the people start with protesting. It was like the oil price went up in Sudan right after, like with 3 times the amount, I think, right after it went down in the rest of the world. And some people were like, just like, they were done with it. And I remember always going to Sudan, I was always like, why? You would see these people all be happy, and I would see like, I was always wondering like, I mean, I respect it and I admire it very much so, but how could they like just take all this stuff that's being done to them, you know? To get back to what I was saying, December, I think the 18th of December, 2018, yeah, thanks. That's when I started with protesting. And this went on for like a good 6 months, I would say. And then in April 2019, al-Bashir decided that he was gonna quit ruling. He named his his right hand the new ruler of the country. So one day after, even more people started protesting, and then after one day, he also said he wasn't going to do it. And then Hemeti, which is the head of the Rapid Support Forces, the militia army, which is like not an official army, he swore that he would protect the people, that he would work together with them. And even though not everyone was really having that, we decided to go with the flow in that sense. And then on the 3rd of June, but this protest still kept going. And I still want to just say one more thing about the protest. Something that I thought was very beautiful is that they took children that didn't have homes, like off the street. They made clothes for them. They schooled them. It became such a beautiful symbol, like the sit-ins. Yeah, the sit-ins became such a beautiful symbol of just like the Sudanese resilience in that sense, the resistance. Like there was art, poetry, music. But then on the 3rd of June, there was like around Ramadan, around the Eid, people were planning to go pray in front of the parliamental building, which would have been something like, whether or not you believe in God, that's a very big spiritual statement and a very powerful thing. If multiple people come together and like with the same intention do something, that's something very strong, right? So, but before that could have happened, the massacre happened, and this was a terrible thing, like the worst stuff happened. People, I'll spare you the details, but this went on for a good 4 or 5 days, I think, and then at some point, the internet started going, crazy about it. Whatever, Rihanna and big artists started posting about it, and then from there on, they felt pressured to stop. After that, I think, they decided to have like, sorry? They went to negotiate, and Sudan, they decided like Sudan would temporarily be ruled for 50% citizens and 50% the army. So basically the army who killed and did the massacre, like the people were forced to work together with them. And they decided to do that, because they didn't really have another choice in that sense. that went sort of well for 2 years, you could say. And then in October 2021, another coup happened. So the army was like, okay, we're not having these citizens, we're gonna rule. And then 2 years later, again, in April 2023, the army, which is like the official army, and the Malaysia army, the rapid support forces, started fighting against each other. Yeah, thank you, Mom. And from that moment on, that's basically the war that has been going on ever since. So it's very sad because the people don't have anything to do with it. Basically, it's not even their fault, you know.
And I also think that's very relatable to what's going on in, the east of Congo. If any of you want to jump in.
The conflict that is happening in the east of Congo has also been, it's kind of just like an extension of the conflict that's been going on there since the 90s, which was in itself just like basically the Rwandan genocide, just like bleeding into Congo. And that, again, you can trace back to colonialism as well, because the Rwandan genocide only happened because of these like colonially imposed ethnic groups, and then the tensions between them. You can, with these things, you can trace it back further and further and further. Like, that's just like what's been happening.
Yeah, but also what happened in the Congo since the 90s was a result of, because like after Patrice Lumumba was the first prime minister of the Congo, whose speech I read, who was subsequently murdered. Like a lot of leaders in the global south have been murdered during the Cold War, whenever the West or the US was afraid of them being too socialist, or being that they would affiliate themselves with the other camp. Because in that sense, you can compare what happened to Patrice Lumumba in the Congo also to what happened with Salvador Allende in Chile, who was also murdered, and then another leader, dictator, was put in place who would be on their side. So like in Chile, it was Pinochet, who was then an ally to the US, and then in the Congo it was Mobutu, who was put in power because he would be an ally to their cause and help them in containing communism in Africa. So because the Congo was used as a base oftentimes for whenever the US wanted to indirectly intervene in other African struggles to contain communism there. So the famous example is Angola, where after Angola became independent, Angola was invaded by the white apartheid regime from South Africa, which the West always wants to pretend that they were on the right side of history, but they supported South Africa in their invasion of Angola. Israel did as well, so that's a very important connection there. Israel supported South African government in their invasion of Angola, and they used the Congo so that they could resupply their ammunition. That it would go from the Congo to Angola, because Angola and Congo are neighboring countries. So in that way, the Congo was used in several African conflicts to the benefit of the West. So it was very beneficial to them, important for them to have a leader in place who was on their side, because the US was very much afraid that what they thought was for the Congo to become a second Cuba in Africa. So that was one of their main motivations for getting rid of Lumumba in the Congo and installing Mobutu there. It's because the Congo, it has to be remembered, it's really at the center of Africa. It's neighbors 8 different countries. So it was a very strategically. Also, so it's not just the mineral wealth that's so important to the West. And the Congo is not just important for its mineral wealth, but it's also strategically, for geopolitical reasons, very important due to the fact that it's really like the heart of Africa, like, with its centrality and the fact that it neighbors like 8 different countries. And Mobutu was very useful. He ruled for them, and he ruled the Congo for 3 decades, for 30 years until the 90s, and they had not much use for him as much. They didn't need him as much after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, like after the collapse of the USSR. And so what happened to Mobutu then was the fate that we saw happening with a lot of dictators from the global south who had previously been useful to the West, because like I mentioned Pinochet, but like Saddam Hussein was also a dictator who had enjoyed the support of the West for a very long time because he was useful to them. And in the same way, Mobutu had been useful for a very long time, and then afterwards, not as much. And after there was a power vacuum that happened afterwards, and different rulers that came, and they were essentially the West was afraid of also losing its grip on the Congo. So that's hence comes the support of Rwanda and Uganda in invading the Congo, so that since they supported Rwanda and Uganda in their invasion, they would be able to control the mineral wealth through their support of the leaders of the Rwanda and Uganda. So it's also important to like situate it historically that so like these wars also happen because of this fear of losing the grip of a region that they had the control over for 3 decades during Mobutu's rule.
So when the US sort of made this call for wars to stop across the world, but also didn't mention, for example, Sudan and Congo, and a lot of people critique like, yes, but you're also, either you are funding the exact people that go up in arms, or you are funding other countries like the UAE that then fund people in these countries to continue the war. So I think there's an interesting, that's exactly in the same way, I think with the Congo it's incredibly potent because it has this strategic place, but I think it goes further than that. It's where these imperialist countries are still finding ways to have control on these countries through backing other countries in investing in these conflicts.
Also, like I heard my mom, for example, many times say also that they just keep coming. It's like a lot of these people are not even actually like Sudanese. They come from wherever, they get these people from wherever, and they also come to Sudan like not in a. They're not just here to kill or win the war. They literally steal stuff. They literally stole from like the National Museum. Like they literally like trying to erase the history. Which is where a lot of our strength and power lays, as everyone who comes here may know. So it's very multi-layered. And heavy. And something else that I also wanted to say about the Rapid Support Forces, as some of you also may know, is the fact that it's not an official army makes them have almost no dignity or respect towards human beings, in that sense. They themselves act like very inhuman, That's why also like we call them Janjaweed, and Janjaweed actually means like devils on horses, like, yeah.
Yeah, and can I maybe ask Ras, because you might know more about this, is that also sort of the consequence of these proxy wars, where because there are all these unofficial fighting forces, they have a lot more sort of, they're almost like unstoppable, there are no limits to sort of the violence and the damage that they can do?
I don't know if it's a result of the fact that they're illegal, because like in the sense that official armies have also been complicit in a lot of the violence that happens towards civilians, towards women, and sexual violence that happens against women also, and also like not and I don't mean so like it's not just the militias, so like the rebel groups, and like I said also of official armies, and then also at times the Blauhelmen, you know, like the UN blue helmets, who have also been at times complicit, and it was a huge scandal that even they have been complicit in like a lot of the violence that has happened in the eastern parts of the Congo. So I wouldn't say that so I don't. So I don't just think it's about. It's due to the fact that these militias are unofficial or like illegal. Like, no.
Yeah, and maybe I guess what is currently going on in Palestine is also showing that if it's an official army, it doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Official armies can be just as detrimental. Yeah, and also engage in sexual violence. What is what we see now in Palestine? You know, like Israeli soldiers committing sexual violence against Palestinians. Yeah,
exactly. Also, last time I thought it was so interesting. Safa said also it was about what we can do, and it was during the community gathering about Sudan. You know, if you want to do something for Sudan, you can boycott a lot of the same brands that we're boycotting for Palestina. So I'm wondering, in that sense, how do you feel about, so what can we do here? And also another question, no, let's first focus on this one. Yeah, and I will want to ask all of you to reflect on this.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I mean, with consumerism, I always feel like it's really important that you make this kind of nuanced argument that is not just about like, okay, like how can we shift the responsibility on the individual, but like rather just highlight how maddening it is, how we are just involuntarily so implicated in these things that we don't want to support. We've seen how boycotting and divestment it has worked in South Africa, and that's also why it's like one of the main tenets of the Palestinian liberation movement. So I think we can learn so much about that for other liberation movements as well. So I think it's about time that that catches a bit more steam in those as well.
Yeah, because unfortunately, as we've seen in history, is that change didn't just come because people suddenly became, or the press suddenly became conscious of the fact that what they were doing was wrong. Because like they're not stupid, they know that what they're doing is wrong. But like once they see that there is like economical consequences, because like even slavery in the U.S., like a major reason why it eventually was abolished was because it just wasn't as profitable anymore. Like there's this myth that Abraham Lincoln read, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and that's what made him realize that slavery was wrong. But that's a myth, because it's just like slavery was it's part of an agrarian economy, and in the 19th century, like the U.S. was industrializing more and more and more, like this agrarian economy, this economy based, agrarian economy was actually holding back further industrialization of the country. So that's why eventually Abraham Lincoln was so against. That's the biggest reason why Abraham Lincoln was against slavery, because it was like it was holding back the country basically from industrializing. And Walter Rodney explains it very well in how Europe underdeveloped Africa. And oftentimes it's the economic factor that becomes decisive, and not the moral consciousness of the oppressor, unfortunately. But that makes sense, because if they had a moral conscience, they would be doing the oppressing in the first place, So that's why these economic these methods that do target the economic they do target profits, such as boycotting. Are so important. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add, Christine.
Yeah. As we said, boycotting really, like helps. But I also think like we should continue to, organize and educate.
Yes.
So it's just very beautiful to see people come to events like this, because to be able to put pressure, to have this domino effect, we need as many people as possible. Like that's why people would say like these protests don't help, like, or whatever, but they actually do. The more people actually know, the more pressure will be put on the countries. The more they'll indeed realize that they see the people up that actually support these wars will feel a bit of the consequences to the degree which is possible. Let's just stay hopeful and keep fighting.
Are there any people that are like immediately, I have a question, burning question? Yes.
All right, so this was just something I was thinking about as, Florence, you mentioned the point about the consumer culture. And I think for many of us who recognize that we have to sort of live around that, we end up feeling quite guilty, at least I feel quite guilty about having to live in that system. And I just wonder, like looking at the emotional aspect of it, how do you think we should really feel about it? Do you think we should continue to feel negatively, or do you think we should focus more on positive action? Like, what do you think the emotional space around living in that consumer culture, which is like directly connected to the exploitation of other people? How should we feel about that?
I mean, it's a really good question, because I think we all have to reckon with these emotions a bit. But at the end of the day, I don't think that like guilt is a very productive emotion. And I think I don't think it's a very productive emotion. It's like what I think it should rather be is kind of a starting off point to like elevate our political conscience a bit and like realize where the overlapping points are between these liberation movements and our own liberation, because we can like we realize that this consumer society is like not benefiting us, and like our like most deeply like personal lives is like kind of a replacement for all of these things that we're lacking living in a capitalist society. And I think also that consumerism is kind of the arena where we are supposed to feel like empowered, because we have all this freedom to buy all this shit and feel happy about that. But it's actually just a distraction from how incredibly disempowered we are, because we don't even have this political influence that we want to have over these global situations. Like we can like every 4 year vote for this or that capitalist genocidal government. And I don't think that we should stop at guilt. We should like come to this awareness of our overlapping struggles and like just deepen our solidarity through that.
What I would just like to add to that is something that I've heard recently, and that has been also like echoing in my mind as well, is like not shameful awareness, but loving awareness. Also, specifically, if I can just talk about myself in that sense a bit more, it's just coming from African, Muslim, Arabic background. Shame is quite a big thing in our cultures, so that's already an emotion that I have been dealing with for, the majority of my life. So, shaming ourselves, feeling like we're, like survivor's guilt is, like you said, right? It's something that is not, like you said, right? It's not productive. So let's not try to be too hard on ourselves. And also they always say like the people that come here to these evenings, it's amazing that we're here and we're educating each other, but it's actually usually not y'all the ones that have that need to hear this the most. It's the people that don't come to these events. We should also not put this burden of trying to save the world only on ourselves, like we're multifaceted human beings. We're also still allowed to have fun, fill our own cups up, to be able to show up for the world better. Yeah, I wanted to say that.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna, just because I can't. I'm so sorry, but it kind of goes back to what you kind of inspired. You kind of inspired me in that sense when you were also talking about the revolution in Sudan, and I think thinking about that and relating it to here, I always feel that yes, we are not the ones that have to be educated, but I always get so much strength and power from movements that are also sort of putting out these ideas like you also said about boycotting, because then I think this idea that sort of starts here in spaces like these also spreads, and it also puts the burden more on governments to sort of, yeah, do more in that regard. So for me, in that sense, sort of putting aside our feelings, but thinking more in actions, which also, of course, comes from feeling, but a different type of feeling like anger and holding people accountable, to me, is so powerful. And yeah, I just wanted to add that. Any other questions?
Hello. So I was briefly reading the Black Panthers speak, and I see that the issues that we had 30, 40, 50 years ago are still very much alive today. Police brutality is still rampant, racism is still very much alive, and they say that history is written by the winners, and they reshape the history however they want. So it's kind of difficult to not, how to say it, drown in despair and feel that wherever we do, is it really going to change history? And so my question is, how do you keep hope alive?
Yeah, how do you keep hope alive? I would say we don't really have another choice, right? I mean, life would just, yeah. I mean, of course, it's much easier said than done. But if I would be less hopeful, I would not have any fuel to keep continuing what I do, and I still am reminded by the beauty of the world. I am privileged enough to be reminded by the beauty of the world, whether that being speaking at an event like this, having people show up, seeing people are actually engaged and want to know more about the things that are going on in my country and in your country and the world, you know. Yeah, and I get to have a positive impact on my surroundings. But something else that maybe isn't like fully like answering your question, but something that I thought of last week, I was fortunate enough to visit at the Yuva. Like there was this seminar by this woman Zainab al-Badawi, which is like a Sudanese woman who, yeah, I saw you there. Yeah, nice. Was this Sudanese woman who worked for the BBC. She did this TV show, which is like 20 episodes. It's called An African History on Africa. Where she visits like many African countries and talks to all these academics, where they tell the stories about Africa, you know. And something that she said in the beginning of her speech was she just showed many different empires, like the Kingdom of Kush, the Mali Kingdom, you know, so like different kingdoms. And she said all those kingdoms have risen, you know, and they fell, and that. Just not to say like to take away anything from what we are experiencing, but that's like sort of up until now it has been nature, and it has always happened that eventually they always fell. So you know, maybe and inshallah it will be in our lifetime and maybe not, but I just refuse to. I really believe that every little ounce helps, and I do see change, and I do see a big difference. And I mean, I'm like 29, so I'm a millennial. But like when I look at Gen Z and Gen Alpha, you know, like my little uncle moment. But I really see like how much more, and of course not everybody's like that because polarization is also happening. But I do see like more people are like, yeah, they know stuff. They know stuff. They are aware. They're not taking it. They're not having it. They like so. I do see a change. I do see a difference, and that just keeps me going. Just the next generation, I think. That's what keeps me hopeful. Yeah.
Well, because I do feel that it's important to like also have some perspective, because like when you're in a specific situation, it's like very easy to to think, oh no, this is going the way it is right now. It's the way it's going to always be. But like as we said, like before the event even started, like like once upon a time, Portugal and Spain were the richest countries in Europe. They were the ones who started, the colonial project. And today they're not the richest countries in Europe anymore, And once, like, yes, maybe the Americans think, oh, that they'll stay on top forever. But, like, the Romans probably thought that at one point as well, like, so that is inevitable that it eventually will fall. Like, that's just like, it's a matter of time. It's like, what can we do to contribute to that,
You talked about polarization just now, and I was wondering, I'm very pro keeping the dialogue open, but I feel like online there's characteristics of shaming and guilting people into changing, but I wanted to know how, or do you have any tips on keeping an open dialogue with people without burning out?
I mean, the most important thing in having a conversation is you have to see if someone is actually willing to listen and hear you. Like discussions are meant to help us understand each other, not to convince each other. From understanding comes convincing, yes. But so and it is hard. It's really hard, because I remember around when George Floyd got shot and all black people were sort of like, I'm done. I'm not gonna have the conversation anymore. Like seriously done. I was always, and it's also probably because I come from a bit more privileged background where I have been able to have the space to not feel certain things, that I am more willing to have the conversation than others. For me, the thing always has been that through conversation, I do reach people. I do get to change people, like, but yeah, it's really up to you. Because yeah, it's a hard question. It's really up to you, because like this is how I am able to deal with my trauma. But I'm definitely not saying like every person is different. So if you want to beat someone up because he says some disrespectful and racist, then yeah, you should. like I mean, if it's not like I'm more so saying I'm not trying to like say violence is a good thing, but it's up to everybody to it's up to you how you deal with your trauma. And I really hate it when someone says like, yeah, but I could make this joke with this black friend of mine, so why are you, and then gaslight you and stuff like that. But to get back, because I feel like I'm going off topic a bit. To get back, I did notice that, for example, when my white friends started asking me certain questions around, right after George Floyd got shot, rest in peace. And I was really like, no, I'm not gonna have this conversation anymore. This, that, whatever. The moments and the times that I actually still did it, I did see a change and difference in my black friends and my white friends. They actually did understand me better. They actually made that change. And there's also this example. I don't know what's his name again, but there's this guy, this black guy that really wanted to interview the head of the KKK back in was this the 80s? I don't know. You should look it up. And the first meeting, setting up the first meeting was very dangerous, and they were there, and he had these guards, and like the tension was crazy. Like they almost killed each other, and then at some point this teapot started making noise, and then they realized, like, all of them were looking at the teapot, and they realized it was the teapot, and that was this moment of connection, because everybody in that room was scared of that teapot. So then at the end, the vibe changed, and then they had some sort of good conversation, sort of. And then at the end, the black guy was like, I want to talk to you again. I want to keep meeting with you. And he kept meeting with him. And he kept going to these horse races and whatever. And he noticed at some point they started asking for his opinion. This guy, the head of the KKK, quit. Why? Because he just realized, like, this black guy is just like me. He's black. He maybe eats different stuff and whatever, but he's just like me. Through that, 22 people also quit. And then after that, 20 others. So this might just by, and it's hard, you know, swallowing your pride and possibly being in danger. I'm not saying we should do it, but yeah, it just really, yeah, being the bigger person. It's just, and again, sometimes it's easier than other times, but okay, that's it.
So I don't actually have a question. I wanted to respond to you. I think at least something for me. I used to be quite like. First of all, it's a really like vulnerable question. Like, damn. I used to be really like into like online spheres, and I would argue with people online. It was really exhausting. Until like I generally just like not found, but I really like tried to find like a community that shared similar values as me or whatever, and like, you know, from that I found friends. Like I actually have like a community now, and I never really realized like it really made a difference on me, like having people around me initially that I don't have to convince, who just already understand. And then from that gives me motivation to like not only like wake up in the morning, but also then like argue or even just see different perspectives, try harder in my school. So like really prioritize community, because it's more powerful than you think. Like having, you know, also if you have like a tough situation with your family, then it's even more important, because then they kind of serve as like a substitute for that. So yeah, really. Yeah, and it's hard to find. It's easier to say, harder to find. I understand that. I was lucky, but yeah, that really helps. Okay.
Thank
Sorry, it's not a
you.
question.
Wat is jouw visie over de inmenging van Rusland en China in Afrikaanse zaken? Want we zien nou veel Afrikanen zeggen... Oh.
Okay, first part of the question. Gras, what is your opinion on the complicity or the involvement of Russia and China in African countries?
Want je hebt Afrikanen die zeggen dat het als een bevrijding is. Als je het vergelijkt met landen als Frankrijk en Amerika.
Because there are countries that say that it's a liberation in comparison to countries like France and the United States. That was not a translation.
Wait. Want we hebben al sinds 30 jaar oorlog in Congo. En je hebt Congolezen die zeggen van... ja, het is tijd dat president Tshisekedi zich aan Rusland moet binden... zodat die conflict in het oosten kan sussen. Maar zou dat... Ja? Zou dat dan ook echt gebeuren? Want ik zag bijvoorbeeld...
Up until that point, no, because there's been a war of 30 years in the Congo, and people say, well, maybe we should look to Russia, but that might change something. But would that actually happen?
Want een land zoals China, die investeert bijvoorbeeld veel geld in Congo. Maar ik zag vorig jaar een documentaire waarbij, volgens mij was het in Katanga, waarbij een Chinees, zeg maar, de baas was over een mijn. En volgens mij de minister van Economie de mijn niet in mocht, terwijl het zijn eigen land is.
Because I saw a documentary about a mine in Katanga. Yeah, where... owned by a Chinese company. Yeah, and the minister of economics wasn't even allowed to go into the mine.
I've heard this as well from Congolese people thinking some Congolese people thinking maybe it would be better if we allied ourselves with Russia and China because they're better than France, the United States, and Belgium. They're all shit, you know. And right now, so like countries like China and Russia, like they right now might not be at the moment be as overtly shitty as France, Belgium, and the United States. But that's because they, you know, like because they're competing right now at the moment. So like if you're competing with someone, you can't be as shitty as them because you want to present yourself as the better alternative, you know. And sorry for saying shitty, but just to put it bluntly, you know. But then what's going to happen once like those hegemonic powers right now. Like right now, that's the U.S. and its allies. But what do you think is going to happen if, once they lose their grip because they start losing their power somewhat, as if these other countries are now suddenly going to as if they're not going to treat you poorly as well, because they were never doing it because they all have the same incentive. They're there for economic gains. They're not there because they love the Congolese people, So you can expect the same thing from them afterwards. So right now, yes, Chinese people are the Chinese are building infrastructure, hospitals, etc. But like I said, just to present themselves as the better alternative, and don't expect them to. They want to present themselves as the better alternative, so they're doing it out of self-interest and not out of out of any humanitarian reason or any altruistic reason. So we shouldn't be naive about that. I always think you always have to know why people do what they do. So because then you can at least make an informed decision as to, okay, am I going to engage with this person or that entity, and then you can also know to what extent do I want to engage myself with this or that, or this person or that person, or this entity or that entity. But never be naive as to what people's motivations or a country's motivations are. So so it's the same motivation as the current hegemonic powers have. So that's why you should expect the same from them afterwards if they don't have any reason to present themselves as the better alternative, because there is no alternative anymore. Then they'll just be the same. So and you see that in Europe as well, right? Like, okay, at first the liberalism and bourgeois society presented themselves as a better alternative to the monarchical system, but then after they after they became in power, as Europe during the 19th century became a bourgeois society, they were just as exploitative towards the peoples who had before been exploited peasants. They now became exploited workers. So
Yes.
It's exploited proletarian workers. So
Thank you. I think that's a very clear and good question.
Thank you. Maybe it helps answering your question. I will say it in Dutch, and you may translate to English. Boeting, een Wagner-groep, steunen de Rapid Support Forces. In feite, de soldaten van het leger van Rapid Support Forces is getraind in Russia door de Wagner-groep en Russian army. Okay.
Oh, so wait, I have to get the techniques right on it. So Boeting, which is a part of the Rapid Support Forces.
President Boeting van Russia.
Oh ja, president.
Wagner-groep.
Ja.
Wagner-groep.
Ja.
Zij interfereren ook in de oorlog in Sudan.
So the Wagner group also interferes in the war in Sudan.
Ze zijn eigenlijk een soort van steungevende.
They give support to the Rapid Support Forces.
Door hun leger te trainen.
By training their army.
En dat is omdat zij uiteindelijk de Soedanese goud willen natuurlijk.
That's because they want the Sudanese gold for themselves.
Aan de andere kant, Oekraïne heeft SAF, Soedanese leger, geholpen in het vechten tegen Rapid Support Forces.
So on the other side, the Ukraine army helped the Sudanese army in their fight against the Rapid Support Forces.
2 keer operaties uitgevoerd daar in Sudan tegen Rapid Support Forces en tegen sommige, hoe noem ik het goed, hoge generalen van Wagner-groep die in Sudan waren op dat moment. Dat is in oktober 23.
So there were some operations in where who was fighting?
In Khartoum.
In Khartoum,
Hoofdstad.
where they were fighting against the Rapid Support Forces, and they were aided by
door Oekraïne.
By Ukraine, yeah.
En dat is eigenlijk een soort van proxyoorlog die daar uitgevoerd wordt.
Yeah, that's a kind of proxy war that's taking place in Sudan.
Sorry, my question is connected to this interconnectedness of struggle. Maybe interesting additions also from like the Russian front. We have been, like, I think as movements, we stand on so many shoulders. And I mean, you're sitting right under the book of Angela Davis. And so this makes me think also what freedom, revolutionary and liberatory thinkers are you reading or are you recommending that are actually actively making these connections in their thinking from Sudan, Congo to Palestine, but also Myanmar onwards we go. And I think especially because as we see that the first things that are being bombed are of course, hospitals, but also I think the Gaza Strip has not had entry to books, just like books entering, not just aid, right? But like for the past 16 years, books have been blocked from going in. And so we see that the intellectual, cultural, and political life that can take place in any space of conflict that we're discussing here is deeply affected. So I'm sorry, that was too long, but yeah, I would love to hear what you are reading or what you would recommend us to see these connections.
Yeah, I'm gonna give again that's also where I met you last week was this seminar by Zainab al-Badawi. She just released a book called An African History on Africa, so that's something that I would recommend because she literally goes to get these stories from where it's from. So it's not what I think you mentioned about the winner writing the history. That's like, you know, we get the actual history. That's a book. Another book, I just don't remember anymore who wrote it, but it's called Woman Writing Africa, and it's a series. They have a one about the northern region, the western region, and so on. That's one that I also would recommend. But I don't necessarily have a specific person that, yeah. But these are 2 books that I would recommend.
I think I would definitely recommend just like delving into like revolutionary Pan-African writers, like reading Nkrumah, reading Walter Rodney. I think like if you want to read more about the Congolese struggle, for instance, I could really recommend Georges Nzongola Ntalaja and his historical accounts of the Congolese struggle, because it's kind of so important for how we can understand how neocolonialism's mechanisms work in general. These are just a few off the top of my head, but yeah.
So for me, as a philosopher, writers and thinkers that have really inspired me are Frans Fanon, first and foremost, and Aimé Césaire, whose work I've translated as well, Discours sur le colonialisme. And what I really like about people like Frans Fanon and Aimé Césaire is how they didn't just wrote and thought about their own political context. So like they were both from Martinique, but they didn't just write about Martinique. So and Fanon, of course, you know, like he implicated himself in various struggles. Like he actually also went to Algeria and got involved with the anti-colonial movement there. And Aimé Césaire wrote also about the Congo. Like I mentioned, the play Une Saison Congo, and he was very much aware of like the various struggles that took place in various colonized countries. And then, so like I would recommend their works, Frans Fanon, Aimé Césaire, but also Sylvia Winters, someone I've been very inspired by, and who's also been inspired by Aimé Césaire and Frans Fanon, who also writes about various struggles. Anthony Boakes, who's a contemporary thinker, and he's also often been to the Netherlands, Amsterdam specifically as well. I think it's it's very useful to read his work as well. And who else is important to read?
Could I also recommend another one? Could I recommend another one?
Yeah.
I could really recommend the work of Akil Mbembe as well. A Cameroonian philosopher that I think has a really good cross-sectional view of the whole anti-imperialist struggle. Very strong Pan-African kind of perspective as well, about just the racialized, oppressed condition of blackness as it exists as a construct almost, in our world. Specifically his book Necropolitics, that I think, it kind of builds off this concept of biopolitics from Foucault, expands these to just analyze how there's whole populations that are just constructed as disposable in our economy to necessitate the economy that we have. And he talks about, from the transatlantic slave trade to Palestine. It really makes the connections between the struggles, so that's a really good one.
Yeah, if there are any more things you think of, maybe they can let you know later. Last question in the back.
Hello. I think this question is more about the history, and I think it's quite a broad question, but given the fact that there are very many pivotal moments in history where there is a progress in liberty and freedom, but also the fact that sometimes you fall back to the old government that takes this away from you. Do you feel like we reach a point where we get off this cycle, or given the future, do we foresee that we're kind of entering this point where we get out of this cycle, or are we still already out of there? Maybe it's a bit of a vague question, but between getting a bit more freedom
so you're saying that we're in a reactionary moment? Is that?
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
No, go for it.
I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's almost not as much a cycle as it's kind of like a spiral that it feels a little bit we have all these things that are these forms of oppressions that are just repeating over and over, but it's kind of almost like a continuous oppression. Colonialism has never ended, but it has transformed into a new stage of colonialism. So it feels a little bit like things are repeating, but I think they're just spiraling to a whole other place eventually, more so, if that makes sense.
I feel like what we're seeing right now is that the West sort of is crumbling, and that is why the far right is rising, because they're desperately trying to hold on to what is left, but it's a little bit too late. Yes. But I try to be hopeful, but that's what I truly believe.
Okay, my question is more about our role here in the diaspora. So anti-blackness is a big thing, and this is why people are not talking about Sudan, Congo, even my own country, Ethiopia. No one is really talking about the different genocides, people, whatever. It can be anti-blackness, it can be the normalization of black suffering. And my question is, what can we do here? Now that we're here, what can we do? Because how can we mobilize people? You already said that even in this event, it's already people who are interested, but how can we get the people who actually need to hear this? So I think you also mentioned about how a Congolese, someone who won a Nobel Prize, and also no one from the Dutch parliament showed up. So it's, I don't know how to say it, but it's, even in activist spaces, many times we're also not welcome. So it's how can we fight for this in the West? Is there a way for us to all gather and have more protests. I heard that there's one for Sudan on the December 21st, but more in general, I also hear from people yeah, but why would we fight for Congo if I don't see Congo protest? And these are things that people have told me. So then, what can we do here in the West, in Amsterdam or the Netherlands? Yeah, thank you.
I think.
Thank you. And I'm just going to ask you to wait because I'm going to wrap it up in one big question. And I also want to ask you and another student for the movement, the Free Movement for Palestine. They printed out and they put out some educational material also about the connected struggle. So I think you're already doing some of that work. It's on the table in the back. And why I want to kind of finish off there, because I think it's a great question. And I also want to kind of broaden it up a little bit. What can we do from the diaspora? But also, I would say, a bit more in recognizing and finding each other in the connected struggles. So right now, there have been protests. Obviously, I don't understand these people about there not being protests. That's not to you, but to those people. But we're operating, I feel like, a lot in on islands. And when we look back at history, you already pointed to it, for example, the solidarity that was shown after Lumumba died, but also I think in bigger sense for Congo, also on the continent, a lot of Pan-Africanism. There's so many examples here that show that people for 100 years have seen the connectedness and have also, in their activism, used their knowledge of this connectedness and started operating from that. So they were looking for each other. There are books there, Black Power in Palestine. There's this huge history of people seeing that all of their struggles were connected, and so their path to liberation was connected. And how can we bring that more into our activism for the future? And I want to sort of end on that. I want you each to answer.
Yeah, just it's that simple. I think as just like educating ourselves, because when we educate ourselves, we get more to the source. We find out that, like you just said, right? And in the end, it's the same often. Like it's the same people in power that are responsible for many of these things. In some ways, more obvious than other ways. So I feel like that is a very big way for us to. Yeah, to literally find the factual interconnectedness that there is. And if I can also answer what you said, is also something that I think is very important, is see in what ways we can, what part we can take in a revolution, Like for me, for example, like I make music, I make art, that's what I should use to spread this message, Like, and another thing is also just be your own authentic self. Celebrate your culture wherever you walk. The places you walk in, like when you wear your culture with pride, that's protest. That's already rubbing it in someone's face who doesn't want to see that, and succeeding in this, even though what is success anyways, but like your definition of success in this society, that's already planting so many seeds around you. That's what I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Like you kind of said that it feels like a little bit like we have these separate islands of movements, and I think events like this one are so important to break that up a little bit. And yeah, imagine having an event like that with like a crowd like that, but at a protest. Why are we not protesting side by side? Yeah, and not underestimate the revolutionary potential of people power. We talked a little bit about how the narratives are often written, or like always written, by the colonizers. And when we look at even anti-colonial independence movements in the past, we don't really remember the stories of people rebelling in the streets and making themselves kind of ungovernable. We kind of think like, oh yeah, the colonizer just gained a moral conscience and just ended the oppression, but that's not how it goes.
I think so I think there's a personal responsibility in that, because I've often have this discussion about people saying, yeah, but they don't tell us about it. So like, it's not our fault, they don't tell us about it. I'm like, yeah, of course your oppressor is not going to give you the tools of how to fight them, So like, it's up to you to like seek knowledge, And especially for me as a philosopher, that's something that like that is so. That's such an obvious answer to me. It's like like you have to go you have to go look for it if you really want to know, because so it's stay curious. So like a lot of the things that I know about the Congo is also like stuff that I had to, on one hand, like be curious enough to like listen to when I would hear my mom talk with her friends, because people from the Congolese community, because oftentimes I was also, like not old enough for them to like take me seriously in a conversation of that, so but like so like they would not necessarily sit down and tell me all of this. Like, no, I took it upon myself to like listen to them when I would hear them talk about what was going on, and so like that formed my consciousness a lot. So like just wanting to hearing them talk and then wanting to hear more about it, and then also like looking stuff up for myself in the library, in books that I could find, and that was then on the and I didn't do that just for the Congo, but also like for other for other regions as well. So like even the way that for example, like once when I was when I was a teenager, I became I started to read more and more, and this is also how I learned about, for example, these various struggles in Africa, and how Cuba had been in solidarity with various African independent movements, like how they were involved in Angola, how they fought the apartheid regime in South Africa, how they also came to the Congo with Che Guevara going to the Congo, and that's why, for example, in my final year of high school, when we had to do like an oral exam, like I did mine on Che Guevara in the Congo and the independence movement in the Congo. And my history teacher, who was a white history teacher, actually really loved it, because he thought, oh, that's so original, because all of the other kids were doing like these cliche topics, World War II, Marie Antoinette, la la la, and there I was, Che Guevara in the Congo and the independence and the Congo crisis. So, but that was just me being very curious about all of these interconnected struggles. Just by reading about reading about my own history, and then the more I learned about it, the more I learned about how other countries were involved, and then I wanted to learn more about those other countries. But then, yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a beautiful note to end on. Let's stay curious. Let's have these discussions, but also let's take to the street. This is not the end. This is not the end of this conversation. We'll have, if you are very curious, visit us in November or onwards, because then we'll have a little installation on Nobody's Free until Everybody's Free. You're very much welcome. And now we're going to quickly sort of make this space free so that we can end with Razine's performance. He already said it. I'm an artist. I make music. That's how I use my platform. So in a short while, we're going to give it to him. Thank you so much.
Bismillah. This one's for Sudan, the motherland. Bombardement. Terwijl ik loop te stressen om cent. Is toch scheef, mijn neef verloor 2 matties tijdens protesten, progressief gesniperd vanwege hun dreads. Mijn opa bijna dood, kogel vloog langs zijn hoofd. Scheelde maar een haar of hij was van zijn leven beroofd. Mijn tante die me heeft leren lezen, heeft het leven verlaten. Zonder haar man hield ze het niet meer staande. Mijn pa wou me niet zeggen dat het zelfmoord was. Ik zeg dit, met pijn in mijn hart, hoop dat ze herenigd zijn. Voorbeeld voor gezonde liefde waren zij voor mij. Ik was nog klein. Gezondheid, veiligheid, vrijheid en leven. Omdat we er niet voor peeën en het ons is gegeven. Vergeten we het vaak te waarderen. Tot het weg is, dan is het alles wat onze hartjes begeren. Half vol of half leeg. Je kan appreciate wat je hebt of kijken wat er niet is en zitten in stress. Whatever happens, y'all. Hoe kan ik mijn wind celebreren als waar ik vandaan kom mensen niet vrij zijn? Zitten in pijn. Hoe kan het leven zo zijn? Hoe kan het leven zo zijn? Hoe kan het leven zo zijn? Als ik zeg free, zeggen jullie Sudan. Free, free. Als ik zeg free, zeggen jullie Palestine. Free, free. Als ik zeg free, zeggen jullie Congo. Free, free. Free us all. Free us all. Free us all. Free us all. Inshallah. A little bit of backstory. I used to make music by my Dutch alias, Creeper Main. And it was like more so focused on soul, funk, and jazz influences. I released an album back in 2023. After that, I decided I wanted to switch it up. So I changed my artist name to my birth name, Razine. And I decided I wanted to make music in English and Arabic. And this next song was one of the first songs I wrote that really, it felt like me taking back reclaiming myself, reclaiming my identity. All the things that I would be too afraid to say in the street because I was like afraid of being judged. I used it in this song. So without any further ado, Sudan Nights. Yeah, let's go. Did you turn it up a bit? نور الصباح بكل رواح نور الصباح بكل رواح أنا داير أسبح في البحر عايز أكل من عسل النحل داير أصبح جنب الأهل أعيش حياتي بسهولة أنا داير أكل من الفوليا مع أخواني نلعب كورة تخيلين أنا مجنون يا أغفر لهم صلي على الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم. Black and proud African Arab, moving precisely or thinking is random. Astaghfirullah, fly like the new phantom. Subhanallah for the things that can fan. Alhamdulillah for the things that we do. Treat us like this, don't care to get at them. Aghfir ya Rabb for the things that we do. Sometimes it pieces, it's easy to get at us. Astaghfirullah for the thing I just said. Udukhsam billah al-azim and it's true. Inshallah these things will get better and inshallah this day will be soon. Alhamdulillah do whatever the weather. I'm doing my thing, going I'm feeling good. Alhamdulillah cause I think that's forever. أنا هكون يا أكبر مغني في الدنيا حياتنا هنا مش مفهومة ما تفكر في الضرور أنا داير أسبح في البحر عايز أكل من عسل النحل داير أصبح جنب الأهل أعيش حياتي بسهولة أنا داير أكل من الفوليا مع أخواني نلعب كورة متخيلين أنا مجنون يا أغفر لهم صلي على الرسول الغنية دي لولاد العرب بنات المغرب أولاد السودان واللبنان لكل العالم العربي أنا محسي هذه ما بروفيسي أنا عربي غني لك الميلودي أنا سوداني بني هو لوني وأنا مشتاق للتراب أسبح في البحر عايز أكل من عسل النحل داير أصبح جنب الأهل أعيش حياتي بسهولة أنا داير أكل من الفوليا
مع اخواني نلعب كورة متخيلين انا مجنون يا اغفر لهم صلي على الرسول. My favorite part. الحمد لله. For my eyes I can see Alhamdulillah. For my lungs I can breathe Alhamdulillah. I got all that I need Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. وبنقول ما شاء الله. When we see growth and beauty we came so far. One day we will be free Alhamdulillah. Nothing's too far from me Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. أسبح في البحر عايز اكل من عسل النحل داير اصبح جنب الاهل عايش حياتي بسهولة انا داير اكل من الفول يا مع اخواني نلعب كورة متخيلين انا مجنون يا اغفر لهم صلي على الرسول. نا 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 بكل رواق نور الصباح بكل رواق. Sudan Nights. What I know what I'm saying. Okay, thank you. Actually, let me immediately give my mom some credit because, yeah. Actually, she helps me when Mama. So basically, I think in Dutch. I've lived here ever since I was 2 years old, but I am blessed enough to also speak Arabic. But I translated from Dutch, right? So I check. Before I release a song, I pull up to my mom. So I'm like, Mama, I don't want this to sound like, oh, that's like this Afro-European, pulling up like it's cute, but I want them also to feel. So she helps me with like grammar stuff. But I sing Ana Dair Asbah fil Bahar. I want to swim in Bahar. The literal translation of Bahar means sea, but when we say Bahar, we mean the Nile. So I want to swim in the Nile. مع أخواني نلعب كورة with my brothers playing football. متخيلين أنا مجنون. They think that I'm crazy. أغفر لهم صلى على الرسول. God forgive them. I pray to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I just really try to describe just what Sudan felt like to me in that song, and I actually wrote this before the war even started. Tuti, yeah. Again, shouts out to mom. So my family comes from Tuti Island. Tuti is this island next to the capital, Khartoum. And this island is actually where the blue and the white now come together. And then you have this island. And then afterwards is the Nile. And it continues to Egypt. So, that's why it's just so important to know where you're from, right? Because I love telling the story. Every time I tell it, I feel like so... Like, that's rich, that's rich heritage. So... Yeah, I mean, let's go. Bismillah. I love saying that. Bismillah. Ya Allah, aghfir layya. These days I rather skip the drama. I mean, what up now? Say my prayer, take off the layers. Now it's so spacious. I mean, not hateful, might get shameful. Still I'm grateful for all the things that I see. That many get to live a life this clean. If you know what I mean, there's war in my motherland. Could have been dead, but they went different. Mom and dad years ago fled. My whole family could have been dead. روانا حيينا من الموت, I'm blessed. That's what I tell myself when I'm stressed. Life for life, it goes so fast. We just try to get by and hope for the best. ربنا ساعد أهلي كتر لهم السنين ودينا الصحة والعافية كتر لنا الخير وعد من الشر لنا كلنا. I mean, Ya Allah, اغفر ليا. These days I rather skip the drama. I mean, what up now? Say my prayer. Take off the layers, now it's all spacious. I mean, not hateful, might get shameful. Still I'm grateful for all the things that I see. That many get to live a life this clean. If you know what, sometimes I feel like when I celebrate, I don't deserve it, can't appreciate the moment of someone else. Bad sense, you could say I'm late. All in search for what is lost. Then I speak to my mom, tell me granny and the rest of the family fossilea to evacuate. This is for Sudan. Come on, make some noise. For Afghanistan. Keep it going, keep it going. Leer Palestine. Wala Syria. Ya Allah, come on. Ya Allah, aghfir layya. These days I rather skip the drama. I mean, what up now? Say my prayer, take off the layers. Now it's so spacious. I mean, not hateful, might get shameful. Still I'm grateful for all the things that I see. Not many get to live a life this clean. If you know what I mean. I mean. Thank y'all very much.
Whoa. Yeah, thank you so much. Was this the first time you performed this song for a live audience? I wanted to claim. Okay, but I feel still very blessed that you shared it with us, that we got to share this space together. So I want to really thank you. I want to thank you so much for this end, because I feel it gave the right energy, and I hope we take this energy out and spread it. So thank you so much.